Hello and welcome, Rangers. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And today we've got another shot-for-shot analysis for you all. It's been a while since we did one of these. Too long. So here we go. Last time we discussed at the end how Bulk and Skull kind of jumped out of the plane, screwed up, and just
Bulked and sculled.
out. Yeah. Or Barted out, as DC fans would put it, in reference to Bart Allen, who always ends up screwing everything up in similar fashion. This time, we're going to discuss some of the scenes of the Rangers just rollerblading through the city. Now, at first glance, this is not an important set of scenes. I've heard it said that it's a dumb scene that had no place in a superhero movie and that detracts. But arguably, for one thing, the problem with, let's say, Batman movies is they never had Batman rollerblading for the city. So for one thing, it fails for that. But the other factor is, in quite a few Superman movies, you don't really get to know Metropolis. Metropolis does not have a personality. Directors are not interested in exploring whatever the heck Metropolis is or where it is. Gotham, while Christopher Nolan was keen to explore it and give it a personality, he at the same time doesn't have Bruce Wayne exploring it too often. We don't get to see too much of it from Batman's perspective. With Power Rangers, though, we get the heroes actually on the ground, actually going through the city, unlike every other superhero movie, minus Batman Begins. On the other hand, with the cheerful music in the background, we get a sense of a place that's a nice city to live in, not too much crime on the surface, but there is a darker side to Angel Grove, as we see later in the film. So this is a pretty important scene.
We also see what the Power Rangers need to protect. This beautiful city.
Which obviously is by the sea, because we see, and my suspicion is that Angel Grove is probably at the mouth of a river, and I'm not sure which. I'm just going to be honest. I would like to know. Doubtless there are fans who would know. Well, I think it's in California, so it would be West Coast, actually. We know that it's in the West Coast then, if it's at the mouth of a river down in California. This, as Dan has pointed out several times, is the most 90s scene ever, as rollerblading was also a fad in the 90s, and the Rangers are rollerblading for the city. In the third shot of the rollerblade scene, if you pay attention, you'll see to the right-hand side, past Kimberly, there's a map of Angel Grove. The fact that there's a map welcoming people into the city, these sort of maps are common in Japan in every town you go to, but they're also common in some places in the US and Canada. Not many, but they are there to be found in some cities. Usually those which are tourist traps. The city having these maps is a helpful guide for people. Now, I know the locals are like, yeah, whatever, I don't even notice it. But for newcomers, what this tells us about Angel Grove is it is a tourist trap, a metropolis of sorts, and that for some reason people are drawn there. Likely, given a lot of the episodes, how there's science expos and parades and whatnot, likely it's more the scientific rather than the arts that attracts people to Angel Grove. Angel Grove is basically Metropolis in the Superman universe, which has nothing to vouch for it except science expos and whatnot. Honestly, I prefer art shows to science expos.
We also have the fact that it's near water, so that could also be
Yeah, because rural regions would have a lot more fertile soil, and people always prefer to live by the sea. In the following shot, you see, just very briefly, the tram. And this is going to be relevant later in the film. So we're seeing there, if briefly so for a few seconds, something that's very important. Batman Begins would take the idea of the tram and a cheap means of transportation across the city, where it heads to the heart of the city, idea copying this movie to an extent. Yeah, Power Rangers did it first, as always. Funny how every superhero universe, after Blade and X-Men, seems to just rely on copying urban ideas from Power Rangers or storyline ideas or character ideas and just dumbing it down across several different movies, when you could just watch it in this one. Now let's get to the jump scene. First to jump is Billy. Billy being in the lead is a bit of a surprise. Idea of Billy being the first one to do reckless stunt and act like an impulsive teenager is pretty cool, because at the beginning of the series he never would have been caught dead doing this, and in universe the idea was that he was not in good enough shape to do this. But in reality, we all know David Yost was the most in shape Power Ranger actor on set at first. But the fact that Billy's willing to actually do this at this point shows how much he's grown. He's gone from some nervous autistic kid who is honestly scared of the sight of his own blood to now an impulsive kid just trying to have fun and
performing magnificent flips.
Yeah. Next to go is Tommy, but on the other hand, just trying to have fun and taking the lead. That shows that he's at a good point in his life. He's having fun. Like, you never see him have fun in Zio, because in Zio, he's at a stressful point in his life. He's not having fun anymore in universe. Then we get Kim, who's always following after Tommy, a bit like a love-struck puppy, if we're being honest. That part makes a lot of sense. Now, in one of the shots, if you pay attention, Billy lands behind Kim when he was the first one you really saw jump. So this is a weird cut here. It means that Adam was forgotten somewhere in editing, because I didn't see him jump, and he's in the lead. So Adam being in the lead should be no surprise. He deep down does like to have fun and whatnot. But it seems like the director and the producers and the editors forgot about him. That's pretty funny. You've got Billy, who's landing behind Kim, so he was not the first one to jump, which is so weird with the editing. Just because I love this movie as one of the greatest films of all times, in my opinion, doesn't mean I'm not blind to a lot of the flaws. After Billy and Aisha being kind of to the rear is a little weird. And then you have Rocky. For these two to take up the rear is a bit of a weird thing, but it's also something that can be explained away as Aisha's playing mommy. Rocky in some ways does tend to play the kid brother. He does tend to follow the lead of a lot of the other Rangers, such as Billy and Tommy and even Kim in a way. In Rocky's case, it's a case where a good leader is also a good follower at times. Because in the series, Rocky does take command, even over Kim a few times, in order to restore a bit of discipline and calm to the team. And then he often, if Tommy's in the scene, turns to Tommy and says, well, what are we going to do, Tommy? Other times, he takes command and says, all right, it's morphin' time. Nonetheless, he is always kid brother to Billy's big brother. And he's also a bit of a kid brother with Tommy. So Rocky, while he is a bit of a older brother type to Adam, he's like a middle sibling of the Power Rangers. Aisha is very much a maternal figure. Not all the Rangers and not all the characters see her that way. We go from Black Ranger to White Ranger to Pink Ranger to Blue to Yellow to Red. When we do get a good clear shot of the tram and of Angel Grove's business sector of sorts, we can see that it has very ugly architecture. I'm just being honest.
And I get that in California, skyscrapers must have a certain code and whatnot due to earthquakes.
Shows that Angel Grove, before anything else, is a very modern city, and that likely this could be why Tommy moved out to Reefside, because it was more rural and he was wanting a smaller town, a quieter job, probably with a decent enough pay and lower cost of living, as Angel Grove would likely have a pretty high cost of living given the size of it. So in this movie, we're seeing that the scope of the city is one of several million people. That's a respectable size, but it means that everybody's always busy. The Rangers fool around going down the stairs in rollerblades, which is pretty dangerous. I know.
Luckily, they're wearing their helmets.
I know of plenty of cases back in the 90s where there were reports of kids trying to do this and breaking limbs. Apparently, this inspired a bit of a bad style of behavior amongst some children. But on the other hand, it wasn't the actor's fault or the character's fault. The Rangers are just being cool. Kids were being dumb for trying to imitate them. You're not Power Rangers. This is why it's so important to instruct your kids in the difference between television and reality. Of this scene is to show that the Rangers are taking risks and they are adrenaline junkies. But they're not going around like, say, certain Marvel heroes who, when they're bored, they go out and pick fights with another Marvel hero and wreck the city just for fun. The Rangers are taking responsibility for themselves, and their idea of getting a good adrenaline rush is to only risk their own lives. But at the same time, are they really at risk in this situation? It's more like they're acting like court jesters and clowns. So it shows that each of them have learned not to take themselves too seriously, which is an important lesson for those Rangers like Billy and Tommy, and even Kimberly. They've learned to fool around a little and cut loose. This is something that maybe the Stone Canyon Trio better understood than the other original trio. That said, Aisha might be a bit of the exception, as she did tend to take herself pretty seriously at times, like the fire escape incident.
Yeah, she got carried away in that episode.
When they arrive at the construction site, the Rangers decide, oh, this is a good shortcut. Likely this annoys some of the construction workers, because Angel Grove is a city of business and science. This science and business side, this cold steel side of Angel Grove, ends up giving a bit of the city and its inhabitants an arc within the movie, as we'll see later with the parents of Angel Grove. And it's a very rare thing for a superhero movie to give the entire city and inhabitants a subtle secondary role and character arc of sorts. So we're seeing the city at the beginning of the film, such as when Bulk and Skull come along and clown a worker, but he reacts with considerable annoyance, almost anger. And then you see how the inhabitants react at the end, having had a brush with death. So the movie does a great job here, is my point. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you were Billy taking out a news monster.